Om Mangalam Gurudevaya Devye Matriksha Mangala Mangalam Bhakta Brindevyo Sarvalokaya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Chadharmasya Sarvadharma Sarupini Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Mangalam Om Sarashiva Samarambam Shankarachara Madhyamam Ashmarachara Prayantam Vande Guru Paramparam Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Deva Maheshwara Gurureva Param Brahman Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Om Bhadrakali Namo Nityam Saraswati Namo Namaha Vera Viranga Veranta Vijjastana Evacha Sri Ganesha Sharada Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om Guneshwariye Namaha Jai Ma, happy to join you again this week. Sorry we had to miss last week, but we'll try to make up. We catch up a little bit. Actually, the verse I want to talk about last week and the verses this week, we'll probably be able to merge them. I'm hoping to get 3 or 4 verses today. We're almost at the end of the first chapter of Devi Gita. In my mind, I had a romantic idea that I'd finish, I think it's like 6, 7 verses today. And so next week we could start chapter 2, but I don't think we'll quite get there. Practically, so logistically, so we'll most likely next week we'll finish up chapter 2. I'm sorry, the last few verses of chapter 1, and then with chapter 2 comes really the true beginning of the Devi Gita, where the Devi herself is speaking, and she starts strong, speaking about Vedanta, right? The nature of the self and herself as the nature of the self. But where are we now? The goddess has appeared to the gods and asked them, because of their devotion, appreciated their devotion, asked them what boon they wanted, why they come together, what question they've asked, and they remembered their original emergency that they need her to be born because Tatakasura has been born. Tatakasura, a great demon, has a boon that only the son, the legitimate son, infant legitimate son of Lord Shiva, can be the cause of his death. And since Shiva has no son and Shiva is not married at this time, Sati has disappeared, thus causing this turmoil. The demon has taken over the 3 worlds, kicking even the gods out of heaven. What to speak of humans, where we are in this state. So they did the great austerity to get a boon that she would take birth as the and marry Shiva, right? And by marrying Shiva, have a child. That child would kill Tatakasura. That child becomes Kartikeya Skanda in the main stories. But they also ask a deeper desire, a deeper boon, that they may always have devotion, unflinching devotion to her lotus feet, right? And so she agrees to her blessing is that she will grant them devotion to her lotus feet as well as be born, right? And she says, I'll be born, and she makes a special signal. We'll look at the verse real quick as our backup here. Screen share. Go back a few verses here. So their question, their request, their boon that they request, may we always show unswerving devotion to your lotus feet. This is our foremost wish. We also pray that you will assume a body. We spoke on this verse already. Vyasa, the narrator, continues, that supreme ruler, Parameshwari, listened to these words of theirs and gave reply. She said, my potency, an aspect of myself, who is Gauri, means the golden color Parvati, will be born to Himalaya. So an aspect of herself will be born as a daughter of the Himalayas, as Gauri, Himavati, Parvati, Shailaputri, these beautiful names referring to her as a daughter of the Himalayas, right? She will be given in marriage to Shiva, right? I have an old picture of a classical picture of Shiva going after the wedding ceremony, going back to the Himalayas with his wife, Parvati. and will furnish what you need. What they need is a son. So they will give birth to a son. Of course, the birth of the appearance of Kartikeya is itself a mysterious event, right? Not a normal birth, as you can imagine. With Shiva and Parvati, nothing's normal in the normal sense, right? So she'll give you what you need. You shall, and then so I will be born. An aspect of myself will be born as Parvati, as a son, as a daughter of the Himalayas, right? And will marry Shiva, give you what you need by having a child. And that's the answer to the first question. The second question, you shall be devoted to my lotus feet, due to your earnest desire, their sincere desire. So that's then Himalaya, the god, the personification of the mountain Himalaya. Himalaya itself is a deity, right? Moved by intense devotion, truly worships me in my heart, in his heart. Thus, I consider it a pleasure to take birth in his house. We spoke last time mostly about this verse, that although she, only an aspect of herself, will take birth as Parvati to marry Shiva, she herself says, I will be happy to take birth in your home, giving a little bit of an interpretation, opportunity for an esoteric interpretation, that she's also being born not only as the goddess Parvati to Himalayas to give birth to marry Shiva and give birth to Kartikeya, but also to be born within the heart of her devotee, directly born in the heart of her devotee. I believe that's the real core message. Beyond the parent mythic story behind these verses, I think that's the devotional and overwhelming message, that I'll be born, not only because of your devotion to me, I'll be born in your home. I'll be born, and to be the daughter of the Himalaya means to be born in your body, to be born in your heart, to be born in your soul, like this. So that's where we left off 2 weeks ago. So we're starting with verse 66 of chapter 1. It's a very auspicious time right now, just to give a little bit of a we are also in a very great moment right now. Is, as most of you know, all of you know, one of the Navaratris. And so Navaratri are the 9 nights where the goddess is worshipped. Navaratri, Nava, 9 nights. Devi Navaratri. And the main Navaratri, the most famous Navaratri, takes place in the fall, October, usually October, November. And that's done in a very large way all over India and outside of India and diaspora, especially along in Bengal. She's worshipped as Durga, as they have a 4-day Durga Puja. So there's a very special time, a time of celebrations and austerities and fasting and offerings, all-night dances, all kinds of sacrifices, all kinds of things. The second most popular Navaratri is one we're on now, called Vashant Navaratri. Vashant means spring. So there's a spring, also called Chaitra Navaratri, come because of the month of Chaitra. This is a Hindu month ring right now, right? Sometimes they call it Lalita Navaratri. It's because it's dedicated to goddess Lalita, to Purusundari. Some places also called Annapurna Navaratri, because today in Bengali tradition especially, they celebrate as Annapurna Jayanti. We celebrate the advent of the goddess, aspect of Parvati manifesting as a goddess of food, the giver of food. It's a very auspicious day. There's 2 other Navaratris in the summer, and one in the summer and one in the winter, one in January and one usually in July, around that time. Those are less publicly celebrated, right? And a lot of people don't, even devotees of the goddess may not know about them. Really hardcore devotees, tantrikas like that will do their own sadhanas during this time, fasting, special pujas. But this Navaratri is considered to, in the ancient tradition, the ancient stories, this Navaratri we're now is considered to be the original Navaratri. And I'm telling the story a little, I'm inserting the story because this shouldn't be missed during Navaratri. This story is usually told during Chaitra Navaratri. That originally this was the original Navaratri. Why? Because the gods go to sleep in the winter. The gods are, the Divine Mother goes to sleep, the gods go to sleep, because they're associated with the powers of nature. In winter, the powers of nature, at least many of them, begin to go dormant. trees pull their energy inside and they start hibernating, the outside leaves fall, right? Bears and certain snakes go into hibernation like this. Everything slows down, right? And then during the spring, everything awakens again. So this is the perfect time to worship the goddess while she awakens, right? As nature awakens, we worship her, right? And the story goes that Lord Ramachandra, which is also important because today is also Ram Navami, the 9th. This is the birth anniversary of Lord Rama. So the story is associated with him also. Lord Rama, he, in order to rescue Sita, he needed the blessings of the Divine Mother as a warrior goddess, the Shakti of the Divine Mother. And so the priest told him, no problem, come in spring, right? That we can do a special puja to her. He says, I don't have till spring, right? Hanuman has found her and found out that she was given a year to live, only a year to live. If she doesn't accept Ravana as her husband, then she'll die within 1 year. And there's only a few days left, a few weeks left, right? It has to happen now. So in the fall, that happened in the fall. In the fall, he awakened her, right? Called Akal. What is it? Akal Udbadan. I'm messing up the name right now. Akal Udbadan. The untimely awakening. You awaken the god at the wrong time, right? And then it says, since that time, we've been following Rama's example and waking her up in the fall, right? But this is considered to be the original Navaratri. It's important that I want to connect it to the verses we're in, because soon, in a few chapters in the Devi Gita itself, Himalaya one of the questions he'll ask is, what are the special days and what are the special places to worship you, right? And then she says that one of my favorite verses in the whole text, it says, all days are my days and all places are my places. I can be worshipped any day and in every place, right? But there are still special places. And then she mentioned the Shakti Pitams and certain things like that. And there are also very special times. And then she lists Purnama, Amavasya, Navamis, Ekadasis, Pradoshas, different auspicious days like this, right? And then specifically mentions the 9-night festival in the spring and in the fall. I'm pretty sure the spring one's also mentioned, the fall one for sure, right? That the 9-night festival also should be observed, right, as one of my special times. So she herself within the Devi Gita will glorify this period of time. So it's a very auspicious time for sadhana, for prayers. And today, some people are a little confused before we went live, before the recording started, and some of the devotees were mentioning, today's Novmi. In other words, some people mentioned tomorrow's Novmi. There's a little bit of confusion due to the type of. There's two ways you can be confused. One is you're following the date in India and the date in California. Sometimes they don't match. Sometimes India will celebrate a day early like this, a different, because the world's round, as far as I understand, and so that's the way it works, right? There's also another confusion is about how you figure out certain days, and there's two main standards. One's followed by Vaishnava tradition, one's followed by Smarta tradition. And according to the Vaishnava calendar, even in California, tomorrow will be Ram Navami. By Smarta calendar, today is Ram Navami. And that's due to how you consider which day is Navami, Ashtami. There's a way of figuring that out and what takes precedent. So as per our understanding, today Lord Ram appears at noon, and therefore at noon during Ashtami, during Navami, today at noon it was Navami here, and so today is the day we celebrate it. So there's a little bit of confusion that way. So some calendars will have today as Ashtami, others as Navami. So tonight's our final day of Navaratri, but many people, tomorrow is our final night of Navaratri. Just some nice details about this very auspicious time we're in. So back to our verse. Pick up where I just left off here after a sip. What did the Himalayas say? Hearing, this is a big revelation. What the Himalayas heard, what Lord Himalaya heard, is not only, that their trouble is going to end. She's going to be born. She's going to marry Shiva. She's going to have a child. That child will kill Taraka, and the gods will be able to return to heaven, right? And the three worlds will again be relatively at peace. Nothing's permanent, of course, right? Temporarily and relatively at peace once again. So that's big news. After thousands of years of difficult spiritual practices, as the story says, right? They get the good news. You know, the tadastu, what you request, may it be so. I will be. I'm satisfying. I'm fulfilling your desire, and then the bigger desire, and you will have devotion to my lotus feet, right? Unending devotion. How beautiful. Let's see. But another revelation was given. That other revelation is, I'll be born in Himalaya's home because of his devotion to me. He's worshipped me selflessly. I'll be born in his home. And so Himalaya, who is the spokesperson for the gods in this story, of course, they all go to the Himalayas. He's a personification, the king of the, he's the king of the mountain, and he's the king of mountains. Among mountains, I am the Himalaya, Krishna says, right? So he's a personality in Hindu pantheon. He's the god called Himalaya, but he's also the mountain. The mountain is the king of the Himalaya, king of all mountains, right? So he hears this news. You're going to be born. You're going to be born. Not only are you going to be born, our problem's going to be end, and we'll have devotion, but over and above that, not just over and above that, way over and above that, you're going to be born as my daughter in my house, right? In my home, right? Whatever that means, right? That's that these few verses before the teachings of the Devi Gita get properly underway, I think are full of so much rasa, right? I think this is almost contemplating these 2-3 verses, to me, is almost more exciting than the abstract philosophy mentioned in the Devi Gita. Maybe because my devotional temperament, this is an orientation. These verses are very juicy, meaning very encouraging and exciting to me, right? So Vyasa says, Vyasa uvāca. Version, read a little better here. Lots of little struggles today to try to see clearly. Himālayo'pi Himalaya api tacchrutvātyanugraha-karam vacaḥ. Hearing her exceedingly kind words, right? These are exceedingly kind words. Shrutva ati anugraha-karam vacaḥ. Anugraha, her word, her vacha, those words of hers were anugraha, full of grace, full of mercy, full of compassion, exceedingly kind. As he says, actually he says ati. Ati it means extraordinarily so. Ati means very much so, extremely words of extreme kind. You can imagine what the revelation is. Not just that she'll be born, not just that Tarakasura will be killed, not just that they'll attain devotion, that she'll be born as my daughter. This is the overwhelming message, right? And bāṣpaiḥ saṃ-ruddha-kaṇṭhākṣo mahā-rājñīṃ vaco'bravīt, right? Bāṣpaiḥ means tears. So hearing this, he begins to cry. Saṃ-ruddha. So saṃ-ruddha means means completely, ruddha means closed. So it means the eyes get closed by tears, and so it says, and the throat gets closed. You know, we get choked. We say we get choked with emotion, right? So when you close the throat, that's being choked, right? So kaṇṭhākṣo, saṃ-ruddha kaṇṭhākṣo, completely choked and closed the throat and the eyes with tears. So how did he translate it? It says, his eyes and throat congested. I guess that's the closed ruddha with tears. he replied to, what does it say here? mahā-rājñīṃ vaco'bravīt. So he gives a reply to the mahā-rājñīṃ, the great queen. And so we've been looking at, or emphasizing or underlining, noting or noticing the various epithets of the goddess. In the last few verses, we have Maheshwari, Parameshwari, right here, mahā-rājñīṃ, right? And so this is, remember, these are classic titles of Bhuvaneshwari, right? The god, the ruler, the queen ruler, the queen mother ruler of the universe. So here, mahā-rājñīṃ, the great queen. So it's the queen, not of a kingdom of the universe, right? When we've in early discussions in our Devi Gita classes, in the early discussions, we talked, as the idea of Bhuvaneshwari was introduced, right? We've discussed a little bit. I think maybe we can think of it a little, just remind ourselves a little bit, is by calling her a queen, right, or Ishwari, which is a ruler, right? That the queens and kings and rulers are political leadership modalities, right, of ancient and medieval India and Europe. You know, the idea of ladies and kings and queens and princes and things like this, right? And so the question comes, is she literally a queen, or are we attributing to God anthropomorphic qualities of human hierarchy, government hierarchies, right? And that since we have kings and queens, at least during the time of the text and during the idealized times of this text, where you have stories of kings and queens and royal families and lineages like that, and maybe even the very real experience of kings and queens, and the idea that taking that as like God is the real ruler, so we'll assume God is a king or a queen like this, right? And that's, I think, of remembering that sometimes allows to free us from over dependence on this language, right? As if, God follows medieval political systems, right? Human political systems. There's another view, is that there is a divine hierarchy, right? And that as above, so below. So as this is a system in the heavens, the universe, there is a supreme ruler who sits on a throne served by her attendants, right? And who has armies like this. And we, as it flows down, right, we have impure versions of that, right? So it's an interesting idea, interesting conception. There's two distinct views of this. I don't have a belief either way. I can see like we're attributing human government standards to the divine, which is beyond conception. But also there's ancient world ideas, as above, so below, and that or I can't say every, I have to be careful. Many ancient cultures believe that the way they live is the way that they mirror heaven, right? And sometimes a mirror is not a good reflection, or sometimes it's a reverse reflection. So something, even our versions may not be so ideal. Anyway, just an interesting conception as we get this concept of the supreme ruler and the supreme monarch. Here she's being described as a monarch, right? Anyways, hearing her exceedingly kind words, Himalaya on his part replied to the great sovereign queen, the mahā-rājñīṃ, right? His eyes and throat congested with tears. What did he say? Mahattaraṃ tam kuruṣe yasyānugraham-icchasi. Again, this word anugraha is there, right? Yasyānugraha. She spoke with grace and compassion and love and kindness. So again, now he's going to say, or he says, whoever you show kindness on, right? You can make anybody you show your kindness on can You can do anything by whoever you show your grace on can be transformed, right? Because who's he compared to her, that the Divine Mother can be born as in her womb, right? It's inconceivable, right? So he says, you greatly ennoble whomever you wish to favor, right? Mahattaraṃ kuruṣe. Nocet, let's see if I can figure out the words here. Nocet sthāṇuḥ jaḍaḥ sthāṇuḥ. See, sorry, my eyes aren't good today. Tvaṃ sac-cit-svarūpiṇī. Nocet, something like otherwise, so you can bless whoever you want, whoever you put your grace on, you can bless and transform them. Otherwise, how is it even possible? It seems impossible that you could be born within me, right? And it is impossible that she can be born within her, because think what happened. He mentions, who are you and who am I? I, so dull and motionless, jaḍaḥ sthāṇuḥ, right? Jaḍaḥ means dull, inert, and sthāṇuḥ means a stump, right? And so in the story, it works perfect in the story. He's a mountain, he's a rock, he's a hill, right? Unmoving. Of course, we know mountains move and grow, right? But they're the great symbols. I mean, that diverse in the Gita, amongst immovable things, I am the Himalayas, right? Immovable mountains. So his definition is like a mountain is unmovable, right? I am inert. I am insentient, right? Yet, and who are you, right? You embody, he says, sac-cit-svarūpiṇī. You are the nature of sat and chit, existence, being, infinite being, right? Truth, existence, and chit, consciousness, right? So of course, we also have consciousness, and we also have being, right? And so it's a little bit of play. I believe this is a little bit of a play here, is that Himalaya represents two things. He represents the body and the earth element, right? In kind of a tantric symbolic interpretation of such stories that have been come down to us as per tradition, right? The Himalaya often represents the physical body or the earth element, which is different than Purusha. It's different in Samkhya and at certain level of tantric unfoldment, right? Is different. It separates. It goes a different. The even in Tantra, which holds the world to be in certain sense real and conscious, right? There's still a separation. We have Purusha and then material world taking on a slightly different form, which is not the conscious entity, right? So we are conscious. There's the Atman or the self or the divine within it, which is conscious and sentient, right, and exists in a living way. And then you have the physical body, which is temporary, right, and therefore not existent in its in the full definition of sat, right, and unconscious, not chit, achit, right, asat, not chit, right. So we are, the body is achit, asat, and achit, and you, O goddess, right, are chit and sat and chit, as well as Ananda, of course. So one separation is between the body and the Atman, body and the soul, if we're to use that word, right? She, and therefore the split is, you are the Atman. Remember, she's already been described as the Atman in previous verses, right? And that's within the body, right? Right. So her being born in the body is also could be a reference to how we are. She's born in our body, in the body, and we become living. Although the body is insentient, it becomes sentient. Although the body is temporary, it begins to move, right? It begins to have existence, a different type of existence. So that's one level of interpretation that's given, and the other is that even as a conscious and a although changing but existing individual, right? In comparison to the supreme consciousness, we're like a stone. She's fully awake, we're asleep, right? She's, so that the difference between she has infinite consciousness. We've talked about this in the last few verses. She has infinite consciousness. We have extremely limited consciousness, right? So there is that distinct difference also. So the distinction of the two different times, the great mystery, the great miracle, the exciting part is that she's going to, one nature is going to overwhelm the other, right? The sentient is going to be within the insentient, right? And thus causing the insentient to wake up, right? Perhaps this is one way to look at it. Let's look at the verse. So I'll read actually just for the sake of completeness. I'll read his translation, then I'll read Swami Bhajanananda's translation. I've been forgetting to do that sometimes, just for a different flavor. And Swami Bhajanananda was disciple of Ramakrishna, and is probably the earliest translator of the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam in English. So it's a classic historical translation. So his Mackenzie Brown's translation has been primarily using, "You greatly ennoble whomever you wish to favor. For who am I so dull and motionless compared to you who embody infinite being and consciousness?" Swami Bhajananda's translation, "Thou hast raised me much higher, that thou dost me so great a favor. Otherwise, where am I, inert and unmoving? And where art thou, of the nature of existence, intelligence, and bliss?" He includes, when he says sac-cit-svarūpiṇī, he includes bliss in its translation. It's not really there. Sac-cit-svarūpa is the essence or the nature of consciousness, existence and consciousness, not bliss. But the idea, Swami Bhajanananda often does this in his translation. Sac-cit and Sachitananda are referring to the same reality, right? So sometimes when you say Sat and Chit, Ananda is included, even if it's not included in the Sanskrit. So sometimes he'll fill in the detail. What he means, you're Sachitananda. I am inert, you're Sachitananda. Let's look at verse 68. Asambhavyam janma shaitaistvat prittatvam maman nange. My eyes are, these verses are getting complicated. My eyes are not good today. Please forgive me. Asambhavyam janma shat, where is it? Janma shattai. Asambhavyam means impossible. Actually, such things are impossible. How can the goddess of the universe be born in a finite human being? How can infinite Shakti be born in a finite, in an insentient being like this? Janma sata, even in 100 births, and hundreds of births, it's impossible. That I should become your father, pitri tvaṃ, is impossible in 100 births. Oh, but then it says, what's the word here? Anaghe. He's translated as faultless one, sinless one, right? I think once again, this is I trying to underline or accentuate the epitaphs of the goddess, which means, so this is one of the epitaphs of her. Oh, faultless one, right? And it means sin, but like we would say, fault is not just a sin. It could be any limitation, any mistake, one who doesn't make mistakes, right? And the previous verses, the Himalaya and the gods were praising her, saying that she is all-knowing, right? Sarvagnya, she's omniscient, so she knows everything, right? And she's all-powerful. She can do anything, right? And so he says, that you could be born that I could become your father is impossible in a million births, in 1,000 births, right? Oh, person who knows everything and can do anything. So already, and the previous verses, anybody you shower grace on, you can do anything with them. right? So even in this statement of amazement and humility is realization that it has to happen because she knows everything and she can do anything, including this miracle, right? Ashmaverari punyairva tat samadhi jahi. Even with all the merits gained by performing horse sacrifices and other religious penances. Right. So this is this is about punya. So punya in one of our early seminary courses, we had a discussion on punya and papa and describing how karma works and then afterlife and things like this. And so punya, papa means sin, punya means merit, or and it's hard to, these aren't exactly good translations, but we have to think of it. So punya is seen as having a positive result when one does good deeds or ritual deeds, there's a result of those deeds, and that could almost be thought of as like cash, right? And that the result of your past good deeds can lead to good results in this life or in the next life, just like the results of bad deeds, demerit or papa, can lead to their results, right? So you can be in debt, or you can have positive credits in your account. A little bit that type of thinking. And so no amount of punya, of this type of merit, can lead to the goddess being born as your daughter. That's his point, right? I may have done, and he has in fact done, tremendous ritual practice represented by the word Ashmaveda, which is a horse sacrifice, which is a sacrifice done by kings. And there's a backstory to how Himalaya became Himalaya. He performed also this Rajasuya sacrifice, which is a king-giving sacrifice, also Ashmaveda, which is a horse sacrifice. And that sacrifice, whether it's even, there is records of it being done, historical records, right? Certain kings in the medieval period of India, there's records of this king did it twice, this king did it once, this king did it 5 times. It's very rare to do. It's more symbolic now as being a really difficult and merit-producing ritual. And it was done by, just for reference of it, it was done by kings in order to legitimize, maybe that's a better word, legitimize rulership, right? And in the process, it's very expensive, right, and very complicated. So, and even to do it means that you have, as a leader, as a ruler, you have the wealth available to perform such a sacrifice, right? And part of the sacrifice is that a horse would be let free. It would be part of the sacrifice. A horse would be worshipped and consecrated, and then would be all ties and ropes and symbols would be removed and kind of spanked, and it would be run off, right? It would run off for 1 year in any direction it wants, being followed by an army by the king. So already you can see this is the complicated. And the idea is that wherever the horse goes, right, the army will be unobstructed, right? So if you could trust that you could send a horse in any direction, and wherever it goes, that's your land. You have rulership there. Even if it goes into a neighboring kingdom, right, neighboring state run by somebody else, that you're so powerful that the neighboring monarch wouldn't challenge you, right? No. Although we're like, you see, so you have the idea, you have kings that are kings. They run their own area, but really they're underneath a larger king, a more powerful king, right? They're allowed to be there, right? So it shows that a king, not just a king becomes a small emperor, right? A king among kings. Other kings pay tribute and don't challenge the sovereignty or the rulership of the king, who's this more powerful king who releases the horses, right? And so it has both that you will not be challenged, that everywhere the horse will go into your land. If it goes in somebody else's land, you're so powerful that nobody would challenge nobody would hurt the horse, right? And if somebody tried to hurt the horse and says, "What are you doing sending your horse into my land? I know what this means, right? I refuse to accept you and to recognize you. I've had any power in my territory," then you have a powerful enough army behind the horse that you would do battle and defeat that king, right? So it's a way of showing great political clout and control and strength, right, amongst your neighbors. The horse would go in any direction for 1 year, and then at the end of the year, the horse would be sacrificed. So that doesn't end well for the horse, right? At least not from our perspective, right? So that's the main event of the horse sacrifice. But there's the ceremony itself is very complicated, and lots of sacrifices are done. Many animals are sacrificed. Many animals are released, right? There's very complicated thing, and it's now the last time it's been done under the guidance of scholars, because the tradition has been gone. No kings are celebrating anymore, doing this anymore. They don't have that system anymore, and it hasn't been done even for many hundreds of years, probably. I saw one video of a Swami who had it done, who paid for it to be done, mostly just so that it could be done, that these things wouldn't be, I mean, no animal was sacrificed like this, but that the rituals of it would be done, right? So whatever the Ashwamedha sacrifice was, right, it represents the gold standard of merit-producing sacrifice, right? Doing this is a ritual act that produces tremendous merit, enough merit that it's said to confer legitimacy to rule. And that's actually a very difficult thing to have. It's not easy to keep. It's not easy to become a ruler. It's not easy to stay a ruler, right? So you can see this is it. And it's said that you produce, like, who was it? King Bali, right? The grandson of Prahlad Maharaj, right? He was performing. He was a great devotee of Vishnu, right? But he was performing, it says in the Bhagavatam, he performed 99 Ashwamedha Rajasuya sacrifices, right? And because it says if one performs 100 of them, then one can rule the universe. There's no need for God even, right? So of course that ego gets in your way a little bit if you start thinking you're so powerful that you can control not just a kingdom or a tract of land or a small territory or many territories, but I can control the universe, the world itself, or worlds itself, right? Therefore, the whole Vamana story came to humble him, and humble him that you can't even control 3 steps of land, what to speak of 3 worlds or from your big sacrifice. So it's symbolic. So the point is that this Ashwamedha sacrifice is symbolic of great punya, and it's usually the gold standard. So, like, there's a ceremony that's being done tonight in many temples because of Navaratri, called the Sri Chakra Navarana Puja. It's a worship of the Sri Chakra, and Navarana Puja means the worship of the 9 triangles of the Sri Chakra. It's a complicated ceremony. It takes many hours and it's difficult and time-consuming, expensive worship of the Sri Chakra. And it says, like, in the text that glorify the performance of this, it says it's one who performs an Navarana Puja or causes it to be performed, supports it or witnesses, is like doing 100 Rajasuya sacrifices or Ashwamedha sacrifices, right? So it's an example, is like, doing this is so powerful. It's the equivalent of doing, in the ancient world, would have taken what only kings would have done, right? Was an army, right, to do, right? We can do that same amount of punya can be generated by the worship of the Sri Chakra or the chanting of a mantra or like that, so that's the king, literally the king of sacrifices, ritual action, of merit producing ritual actions, right, is the Ashwamedha sacrifice. The other word it says Ashwamedha, and then it says Sami Tat Samadhiha. So Samadhi. So he's translated a horse sacrifice and other religious penances, right? So indicated by the word, I can go back, right? Stop sharing because I want to show you this word here. This is the tat samadhi jahi, right? That samadhi. So you know what samadhi is? Samadhi is meditative union, right? It's a high yogic state, right? And so he's translated most likely, I believe he's translated because the term ashmavedadi begin the type of punya, the things that create punya beginning with ashmaved. So it could be the what do you say? Other religious penances could be the Rajasuri sacrifice or the ashmaved sacrifice, and other punya merit producing ceremonies, right? But then it would leave out, we're thinking about that, it would leave out samadhi. Samadhi is also an important part of this, right? So I think most likely the term other religious practices refers to samadhi, right? And so samadhi jahi is things that lead, the type of practices that lead to samadhi, which means yogic states, meditation, contemplation, like that, you know. Swami Bhajanananda, he fleshes it out a little bit different. He says, it manifests the greatness of thy glory, O sinless one. I'm sorry, by becoming the father of thee indicates nothing less than the merits earned by me by doing countless ashmaved sacrifices or of my endless samadhi. So this means that from Bhajanananda's, Swami Bhajanananda's translation, that Himalaya has performed countless ashmaved sacrifices, as well he has endless samadhi. I mean, he's in a very high spiritual state. In the verses at the beginning of this chapter describing the practices, they also mentioned practicing samadhi. They were in meditative union, right? So we can see it's two different categories, two different types of spiritual practice. One is ritual practice, and the height of the ritual practice represented by the Ashvamedha sacrifice, and yogic practices, internal, not ritual, but internal practices, meditative practices, represented by samadhi. The height, the king of yogic states, right, is samadhi, and the king of yogic practices are the type of practices that lead to samadhi. Just like the king of ritual practices, punya producing ritual practices, is the ashmaved horse sacrifice. So horse sacrifices and other ritual actions, as well as yogic practices, like the type that lead to higher mental state, internal states, like some unitive states, right, do not lead in themselves to the goddess being born in your home. That's the thing, right? So it's true that he has practiced countless rituals and that he has attained high states of spiritual unitive experiences, samadhi experiences, right? But the amazing thing is that in 1,000 births, it's not sufficient, right? Yet without such practices, it's also not possible. It is true that he did this, right? But it's not sufficient, right? Well, ritual and meditative practices give good results, right? And may be necessary to have such an experience. They're not sufficient, right? What's sufficient? It's grace, right? That's this anugraha keeps being used. Every verse we're reading, the word anugraha will be there, mercy or grace, right? It's her grace. So from her part, she keeps saying, the goddess keeps saying, it's because you have devotion, because you're devoted to my feet, because you worship me selflessly, right? The goddess's perspective is you have bhakti, right? Pure devotion, right? And the devotee's perspective, is you have grace, pure mercy, right? That combination is something miraculous happens when those two perspectives meet, right? The love and purity of heart and devotion on the sadhak, on the devotee, and pure mercy and from the divine. That combination, we've talked about this before in other contexts, but that it says that actually initiation itself, diksha, comes from the meeting of grace, right? When grace and devotion meet, right? When one sees that combination, something mysterious happens, a divine birth happens, right? So what's being described by her being born to the Himalaya is not the result of ritual or of yogic trance, right? It's but over and above ritual and yogic trance, where there's bhakti, she can be born. This is the main point. Go back to the verse here. Oop. All right. So that I should become your father in the course of 100 births is astonishing, O faultless one, even with all the merits gained by performing horse sacrifices and other religious penances. Verse 69. Adra prapancha kirtihi swa jaganmata sutabhavet aho himalasyasya dahano danyoso bhagyavan iti. So he's now imagining what the result of this. Millions and millions of devotees, of gods and humans and even demons worship her, right? Many have devotion. Many have performed rituals. Many have even in that assembly, the gods that went to that the Devi is appearing before. Many have devotion, but a very few have given birth to the Divine Mother, right? Have had this experience, right? So he's thinking, I'm going to be famous, right? But of course I'm not being. So he describes it. He's realizing the singular uniqueness of this event. It's not normal blessing. It's not a normal boon. Even the two boons that were asked of arranged to be born to marry Shiva and kill so that Tarakasura can be killed and save us from this great tyrant, right? And give us devotion to your lotus feet. These are the boon. Tadastu, she's given that. She adds a new boon. So this is extraordinary, right? Ajja prapancha kirtihi. All the world. Prapancha means like worldly ideas, right? Common thoughts, right? The thoughts of regular people, of the people all over the world. They'll think I'm famous. I'll be renowned. I think he translated. Now I shall be renowned, for all the world will think, right? Ajja pramancha kirtihi, right? Syaj jagan mata sutabhavaha aho ahaha. Sutta bhavet. Sutta bhava. Sorry, I jumped ahead of myself here. Now, so Ajja Parancha Kirti Swa Jagan Mata. That Jagan Mata. So this is a great play. It even has a little bit, even doesn't rhyme, but it has the same kind of word syllable meter. Jagan Mata Sutta Bhavat. Jagan Mata means mother of the world, right? So Jagat means the world, means the vibrating, moving world, all this. So it means the world mother. It doesn't mean the world as like the earth, right? The world as, not even as, but as existence. All universes that exist taken together. That is Jagat, right? So Jagat Mata, the mother of that, of everything that exists, of all universes, right? And what a mother means, within it, she's the womb that holds everything, right? As well as she's the source of it, the creator, from which it comes, in which it exists, and for which it comes, the one who makes it come, right? The cause and all the classic ways of causation, right? I shall be renowned, all the world will think. The world mother has become Sutta Bhavat. Sutta means daughter. Bhavat means like the in the state of a daughter, right? Because she's actually the mother, but she'll be like a daughter. She's taking on the position of daughter. And so the position of daughter means dependent, right? We're the one that take care of. The Jagat Mata takes care of everybody, but we're the one who takes care of our daughter, right? Our daughter or son, right? The world mother who's taken the mood or the position or the state of daughter. Think how beautiful this is. That's the great mystery, right? So it's tremendously intimate. We mentioned 2 weeks ago in our last class, Ramakrishna's example, we put it back in front of our mind, that when we think of God as all powerful, we think of Durga with 18 arms or 1,000 arms, right? Or the universal form of Vishnu, like this, right? Awe and reverence. Oh, you are God, you are all powerful. And they have that. The statements of her describing mahā-rājñīṃ, Parameshwari, Bhuvaneshwari, right? All these statements, you are all powerful, you're the goddess, you're the controller, right? So that one who's a controller, all power of God, but when love develops, the knowledge of God's power and the fear of God, or being overwhelmed, or be impressed by God, comes down, and intimacy awakens. So Sri Ramakrishna said, first you see the 10-arm form of the goddess, then the 4-arm form of the goddess, then the 2-arm form of the goddess, and then you have baby Krishna, or in this sense, it could be baby Parvati, right? And actually, this picture I included here is of Shailaputri, which is one of the forms of Durga we worship during Navaratri, as the daughter of the mountain. Shailaputri means daughter of the mountain, means the daughter of the Himalaya, right? So this is and once again, 2 arms. She's not all. She is all powerful, right? But that's not the mood of a father or mother towards their daughter or their son, especially an infant in their infancy, right? So this is the great intimacy, that because of Himalaya's selfless devotion, she's going to be born in his life in a very sweet way, where the knowledge of her being God will become covered. And actually, in the Vaishnava tradition, we have a lot of that mood where Yashoda pray. It says that Devaki was a yogini in her previous life, and she got a boon that she would give birth to Vishnu, have God as her son, right? And that she would both have maternal, and the boon was that she would have maternal affection for him as a mother to a child, but also be conscious of him being God. She wouldn't forget. She'd have that love of a mother, but she wouldn't forget. Because imagine, it's like of course we should love our children like they're God, but what if they actually are God? If we knew that could change everything, right? So we don't want to lose, that if we actually have God walking among us, we should treat everybody as God. But imagine if God actually came to your house and then left your house and you didn't recognize him or recognize her, right? So she wanted to recognize. So some version of the story go. But Yashoda, the foster mother of Krishna in the story, she had a different prayer, right? Her prayer is that she would have God as her son, but completely unconscious that he was God, right? Because the knowledge of him being God would spoil the level of devotion and intimacy that she would have for him, right? So this is what's being hinted at, I think, in these verses, right? The type of intimacy that no amount of tapasya can get you, but pure tapasya, if the punya tapasya leads also to purification of heart and pure devotion, And this can also happen. You can devotion. He had devotion. He got intimacy, right? Others have love and reverence and devotion in a certain sense, and they get boons, right? They ask for boons. They get boons, even the boons of loving her, right? But he has so much devotion that his boon is not that. His boon is intimacy, not just boons, right? Most people's devotion, our prayers are for boons, for blessings, right? But his devotion was so pure that the boon he got is not blessings. The blessing he got is not blessings, but intimacy. This is the idea. And then this wonderful aho, right? And technically it's aha, right? The equivalent of oh, right? So what a wonder, right? Just like we have that, I think, in some native local native language, you go aho, you know, like some similar that means that, oh, wonderful, wonder of wonders, right? Himalayas, what is it? Himalasya asya dhanya aso bhagyavan itihi. Oh, that Himalayas, Himalasya is danya. Danya means blessed and fortunate, right? It means blessed and fortunate, right? But then it says bhagyan. Bhagyan even is another, it means a similar thing. It means very lucky, right? So he's used, the word is danya and bhagyan. It says blessed, fortunate, lucky, auspicious. You know, the gods, all the world, the whole world will think the world mother has become his daughter. How blessed, how wonderful, how fortunate, right? How lucky the Himalayas is, right? And so this is not ego coming. Of course, this can be the work of ego also. Like, oh, God, we born in my family and not your family. This is not the mood. He's just like, he's overwhelmed. In these verses, he's overwhelmed. Remember, he's crying and choking in tears. He's choking and blinded by tears as he's saying these words, right? So you know it's not out of ego, right? He's like, it's like the whole world will say how lucky I am that I get this intimacy, right? The mother becomes a daughter. So that's another interesting thing. Think about this. The mother becomes the daughter. The mother becomes a daughter, and the son becomes the father in this scenario, right? So mother takes on this intimacy of becoming the daughter, and the son becomes then the father. It's interesting. Some of us who are dealing with the life stages of family like that, we could also see like this, right? Sometimes the positions change like that, but there's great love and affection in these changes of relationships, right? Our mother becomes like our daughter, like this, and we become like fathers or mothers to our children, to our parents also, right? And so this is a beautiful verse. Yasyastu jattare santi brahmananda nam chakotaya shaiva yasya sutta jata kova syat tat samobhuvi. This will be I think this will probably be our last verse day, I think. Yeah, we're doing good. Yasyatu jatare santi brahmanandanam chakotaya. So now it's describing what they're going to think, right? Jatare santi brahmanandanam. Brahma, the Brahmanda, this is the Brahmanda word, the core word is Brahmanda. Brahmanda means, practically it means universe. A Brahmanda is a universe, not the universe, that like the Jagat, the whole creation, the whole manifestation, but a universe, right? And Brahmanda means the cosmic egg, right? Brahmanda is the cosmic egg or the cosmic womb, right? Has been translated a few different ways like this, right? So Brahmanda, it means a universe, and there's unlimited universes, right? The goddess gives, it says in the Lita Trisati, the 300 names Lita, that by her sidelong glance, maybe I'm just forgetting, but it something like trillions of universes are created by her sidelong glance, right? So it's not universe as like our little galaxy universe. Imagine the entire known and unknown universe we're in. There's trillions of those, millions and millions, multiple millions, trillions of such universes that she creates that exists within her. Within her womb are trillions. Here it says koti, millions or tens of millions. Koti, I think, is 10 million, something like that, right? 10 million universes. She who, and then the word is jattara. Jattara means womb or abdomen. In her womb, in her stomach, in her abdomen, and within her being, she holds trillions of universes, of Brahmandas, right? Millions of worlds, right? They will think, he's still imagining what the people will be all over the universe for all time will be saying, including tonight, here, by us. This is what we're meditating. It's amazing, right? The one who holds trillions of worlds. Each world was trillions and trillions of living beings, right? Think about that, right? Right? That one is going to be born, has been born, they'll say, as his daughter, as Himalaya's daughter, right? Saiva yasya sutta jata, be born as her daughter. Kaha va syat tat sama bhuvihi. Who on earth, bhuvi, is samaha, is equal to that, to Himalaya. They'll say, all people will say, who in all the world is equal to the Himalayas, right? That the one who holds all beings, all existence, all universes in her womb is born as his daughter. Now, of course, this is emphasizing the stories being told about Himalaya, right? We can imagine the story, if the story was told differently, as talking to Himalaya's wife, right? Who gives birth to, if we take the story in the kind of classical mythic story, mythic tale, right? Himalaya's wife gives birth to to Parvati, right? Imagine with that the one whose womb contains everything is born in your womb, right? If we take this a little bit more symbolically, that Himalaya represents the body, then the one who controls, who holds the universe is born within your body, right? Or if the Himalaya represents just the person, right, the limited person, the individual, then the one who holds all limited individuals is born within the heart and body of an individual. This is a great mystery, right? And I think Sri Ramakrishna would emphasize this a lot. This is the great mystery. This is the great glory of the devotee. A devotee, Sri Ramakrishna said, like the heart is the drawing room of God. God lives in the heart of the living room of God, right? Where you could say God, like in a house, you have many rooms that theoretically a person could live in any room, right? But there's a favorite room called the drawing room or the living room where somebody hangs out mostly, right? So he says that the heart of the devotee, Ramakrishna said, the heart of a devotee is that room that holds God, right? But think what that means. That means God, who holds everything, can be held in the heart of a devotee. Of course, this may be poetic language, right? But it gets its power from this contrast, right? That so there are songs and poems that says that a devotee is, I mean, today is Ram Navami, so we can meditate on some of the opening verses from Tulsidasa's Ramayana, right? It says that that God is great, no doubt, right? Because God is, what does God do? God holds, he's the one who holds the entire universe, right? But the devotee is greater than God, greater than Ram. Ram holds the universe, but the Ram Bhakta is greater than Ram, right? Because the Ram's Bhakta holds Ram in his heart. That means he holds the one who holds the universe. That he holds the devotee holds the universe also in his heart, plus God, right? He holds God is great because he can hold the universe and all individual beings. The devotee is greater than God himself or God herself because he holds that God who holds everything within him, right? That's a great mystery, right? And it's poetry, but it's mind-blowing. It's a type of poetry that reveals a profound emotional truth that that normal ideas can't hold. That what does it mean to have this level of awakening, this level of realization? So Swami Bhajanananda's translation of this verse: who can be so fortunate, virtuous, and merited as he whose daughter she has become, whose belly contains millions of Brahmandas, millions of universes. So this is also the mystery of the incarnation, because Gauri is considered one of the avatars of the Devi, right? And she also described herself as herself manifesting, right? And so this is an ancient story of God, of the goddess taking birth. That's a great mystery, how an aspect of the goddess or the goddess herself takes birth, takes a form like this, right? Right. But it can be taken, I think we are meant to take it as a to read it a little bit esoterically, not just an ancient story, not just a story about how Parvati got born, took birth, the Himalaya, and how emotional Himalaya became upon this news, right? But to be taken that this is also symbolic of or indicating the highest type of spiritual experience, right? Beyond granting of boons, but the type of intimacy that comes with spiritual awakening, where when the goddess literally is born, right? And that it's not just historical. I mean, maybe it's a mythical story. We can take it that way. It's a meaningful mythical story that gives the references to how the deities we worship and believe in got their stations, their backstories. These are all important parts of the stories. Maybe we can take it historically. Some people will take it, no, this is how it happened. This is how Parvati was born millions and millions of years ago. I've been to the spot where she was born, and this is where she did tapasya, and this is where she married Shiva, and this is where Nandi sat when Shiva was doing meditation. You know, we can think of it semi-historically. This is prehistory. If you're inclined to think of it this way, right? So let it be that. If you like to think of it, let it be ancient myth, if you want to think of it that way also, right? But for a devotee, it's not sufficient, I don't think. I think this is my the thing that hit me reading these verses. I can say it's not sufficient, right? Even a description, a real historical description or a mythic explanation of our pantheon, right? Even a profoundly meaningful explanation of our pantheon, right? If it's true in any way, right, it should be true for us. It should, she should be born not just we shouldn't be satisfied. I can't tell people what they should and shouldn't do, right? Some, I think, aren't satisfied, right, with God being born in a mountain in the Himalayas, right? Some are not satisfied with that if God can be born, let him be born, or let her be born in my home too, not just in Himalaya's home, right? Of course, the prerequisite is there, right? Pure devotion, worshiping selflessly, maybe millions of horse sacrifices and samadhi experiences. Who knows what it takes, right? But that maybe this is hinting at what it takes. It takes tremendous punya and tremendous spiritual experience and tremendous devotion and purity of heart, selflessness of worship, right? To have this intimacy where she can be born literally completely intimate and known, right? I was remembering, I found it in my notes. They're the famous Christian theologian and mystic, Meister Eckhart. And
his writings are not easy, right? I like my style of mysticism and have dived in many, many times in my life, different intellectual levels. And usually I come out from these deep dives more bewildered than I entered. It's not he's a competent theologian who his own theological ideas and mystical ideas got him in trouble with ecclesiastical authorities, and he was brought up to the Inquisition and put on trial. I think he died before a conclusion was based, and some of his teachings after his death were considered heretical. Some are not, but anyways, there's a verse or a little section approachable. Some of his work, my point is, some of his work is not very easy to just jump into. He's not that like just like one of these one-line quotes that people like to do on mystics and theologians and things like that. So, but this is a quote that I'll read to you. It's about, he's meditating on Christmas, because Christmas is another incarnation, right? That may have mythic meaning, may have historical meaning, where Jesus is born, God is born, right, to Mary and to Joseph, right? And we commemorate, Christians all over the world commemorate that night or that morning and meditate upon the miracle that something happened symbolically, something that literally happened, and it changed history and changed our history, right? So he's somebody who understands the profound mythic and symbolic meaning of the story, as well as also believed it happened, right? He believed the historical birth of Jesus, right? The miraculous historical birth of Jesus. But his meditation on it as a mystic, wanting a more profound experience. I'll read a short quote. Is part of his Christmas meditation on the Christmas story. We are all meant to be mothers of God. What good is it to me if this eternal birth of the divine Son takes place unceasingly, but does not take place within myself? And what good is it to me if Mary is full of grace, but I am also not full of grace? What good is it to me for the Creator to give birth to his Son if I do not also give birth to him in my time and culture? This then is the fullness of time, when the Son of God is begotten in us, right? That the story is not sufficient. The historical or mythic or symbolic story is not sufficient. It's meant to awaken us, to awaken some. I mean, in some, it awakens a desire that to have this happen in our life, and the requirements are given already. She states the environment in which she is born, right? Yeah. And so this is a bit of a, not overly esoteric, but this is esoteric reading of the myth, the devotionally esoteric reading of the myth, right? Right, of the story, right? That it means it answers, it fulfills its primary function, right? A primary function of giving the history of how the Devi will be born, how Parvati takes birth in order to marry Shiva, give birth to Kartikeya, who kills Tatakasura and frees like that, right? It's inspirational and about devotion like that, but it's meant to be, I think the story is also meant to be taken esoterically, symbolically, right? To be read not necessarily just at face value, right? And I think in the Devi Bhagavatam itself the Devi Bhagavatam is a complicated text, right? And we have some of our students are diving into it, right? It's more complex. It serves so many functions. It has a lot of agendas it needs to satisfy to do what it needs to do, right? And it's complicated because not all those agendas are as interesting to us in the present day. But it comes down to us because it fulfilled a lot of those agendas. So all kinds of things that the text does and has to do or tries to do, right? But one of the things it doesn't stop doing is giving small hints of interpretation of these ancient stories, right? right? Puranas are full of these stories, and sometimes and their interpretations are usually, they're like, it's the text itself will justify an esoteric interpretation, a not obvious interpretation, a devotional symbolic interpretation. Like an example, if you've heard me give talks on the Chandi, right, we tend to interpret the Chandi, the different demons, and that on different the Devis in the different battles to be symbolic or correspond to, at least, right, yogic states of our spiritual struggle, obstacles to overcome, and I think the texts lend themselves to this, right? Not just lend themselves to that, almost require it, like calling a demon Durmukh, foul-mouthed, or Durmalochana, smoke-eyed, right? To jump from smoke-eyed, a demon called smoke-eyed, right, to interpretation, well, maybe that has to do with spiritual ignorance or blindness, right? It's not a huge jump. And so the text it doesn't say that, but it does say that, right? Of course, we can bring more than the text justifies in interpreting these things. So I'm trying not to bring more than the text justifies, right? But I think the text not only justifies a certain level of this type of interpretation, it's giving us, it's hinting at this. The next verse, which we'll read next week, he says, what did my ancestors do, right, to get this, and what heaven will my ancestors go to? As if the Himalayan mountains has ancestors, right? We have ancestors, right? This, if it doesn't happen, if the scripture says that if we attain liberation, 10 generations of our ancestors are liberated, right? So if a mountain attains liberation by the goddess being born in his family, then what heaven will his ancestors go to, right? It's like, this is about the human condition. This is about human beings' spiritual search and spiritual realizations, not just, be careful, I can't say it's not about the gods, right, and the ancient sages. But it's not just about them. If it's not about us, to be honest with you, if it's not about us, my interest in the text goes way down, right? Of course, the next section will be spiritual instructions for us, right? But is it for us? If the text says it's for the Himalayas and the gods, or I'm not a Himalayan nor a god, right? Right? So the story's about us. So we have to take that, and knowing that it's about us, we have ancestors, we have selfishness, we have things to overcome, we have devotion that we can develop, we have sadhana we can perform, we have ignorance that can be removed, right? Therefore, this type of interpretation, I think, is justified. I had in my notes, I won't, because it's now already 8:30, and I think it's good enough for tonight. I have my notes, a whole discussion on exegesis and eisegesis and esoteric interpretation, but I think that discussion is probably best left for me from one of the seminary courses or something. But if you're interested in that, maybe next week we can pick it up there, as a way of not justifying guidance and interpreting the mythic stories being told with the text that's in front of us now. So it's 8:30 on this holy Navami, Maha-Navami, Ram Navami night. So thank you for your very kind attention and coming together once again on this holy night. We really sincerely pray the Divine Mother's blessings, her grace on you and your family, and you're all healthy and happy and prosperous and thriving. But of course, that's general. These are the blessings we want for everybody, right? We want everybody to be safe and happy and dynamic and loved and cared for and caring and loving, all that like we want. And we see these are things that are missing in many people's lives and in much of history and much of, as the world's unfolding in front of us on the news, right? This is what we pray. We pray Mother's grace for this. We want her boon. We also have a boon to ask, right? There's real suffering that we want real care for, right, and real healing for, right? But behind and beyond this, the true longing of the human heart as devotees. Of course, as humans, we go to Divine Mother praying for for help with our very human and sometimes inhuman needs, right? As we see, but our real human, our deepest, profoundest prayer on these nights, as we meditate on these verses, is that our heart is purified and we can love her with true selflessness, and that she, like Eckhart, Meister Eckhart. I almost like there's a couple Eckharts out there. I want to get the right one. Meister Eckhart praying that we have this type of intimate experience of the divine. So this is my prayer, divine, at the feet of the Divine Mother, at the throne of the World Mother, that she be born as our daughter intimately in our life. All right. Jai Ma, Jai Ma, Jai Ma. Jai Sri Guru Maharaji ki Jai. Jai Mahamai ki Jai. Swamiji Maharaji ki Jai. Jai Ma Dakshineshwari Bhavatarni Dakshinakali ki Jai. Bhuvaneshwari ki Jai. Jai, Jai, Jai. Any questions or comments? My tangled and incoherent notes today. It's one of those weeks.
Elijah has his hand
Yes.
up.
My fake hand once again. Jai Ma, Jai Ma.
Jai
Thank
Ma,
you
Jai Ma.
so much for blessing us and pouring that nectar upon our heads. It was extraordinary, to say the least. So I have two questions. At least for me, in my own household, tonight I'm celebrating as the final night of Navaratri for this season. And so this is my first question, is if you could, just for maybe like a moment or two, speak about Siddhidatri and something about her. I don't anything. Just something.
Yeah.
And
So
then-
yeah, let me answer that one first, and then before it, because otherwise I'll forget.
It's
I
okay.
can't hold two things in my mind anymore. Not this week. So what Elijah is mentioning tonight is a way of celebrating or observing special sadhanas that can be done during Navaratri, where we worship a group of goddesses or aspects of the goddess, 9 aspects called the Navadurgas. The list of Navadurgas is given an appendage hymn to the Chandi called the Devi Kavacham of the Chandi. That's maybe the goddesses. These names are known other places also, but they're worshipped as a group. As far as I know, this is the first place it appears, as far as to my understanding. And actually, the first one is called is Shailaputri and Brahmacharini. This is where the Ma is born as a daughter of the Himalayas, and the different stages. And then Brahmacharini, she does austerity to get Shiva as her husband, and then the different forms she takes as different stages of her life development as a goddess, right? And also our relationship with her. It also mirrors the 9 Durgas, mirrors our own. First she's born, then she awakens, and she matures, and then she overcomes certain obstacles and certain demons. She takes on different forms. And so the last couple nights there's Kaladatri, which is the form of Kali, right? The great darkness. Then there's Mahā-Gauri, right? The great light, right? After the great darkness is the great light. And then the final night is Siddhidatri, right? And Siddhidatri is one who Datri means to give or to bless, and Siddhi means perfection, one who gives perfection. So you can see what is the perfection we're looking for, right? So Siddhidatri is the final one. It describes her Dhyan mantra, described that sages, gods, people, and demons all are worshiping her, right? And so some of the famous paintings of her will show, demons below looking monstrous with horns and, worshiping her. There's gods and demons and devotees and Brahmins, and everyone's worshiping her, because actually everyone wants some sort of siddhi. Siddhi means perfection. It also means attainment, right? Actually, the word sadhana is related to siddhi. Sadhana is that which you do to get siddhi, right? Siddhi, when you accomplish something. So what do you want to accomplish, right? And actually, siddhi also has some connection to like something that's been cooked, fully cooked. And so sadhana is the cooking process to get something fully cooked, right? So what are we doing sadhana for? And there's many reasons to do sadhana, right? Some do sadhana, the gods, the demons do sadhana to get power and prestige and fame and overcome enemies like that, right? To live forever, right? To identify with their body permanently like this. So, and what they worship, that they get. The goddess can say tadastu, may you have that, right? Right. And so we can also so I mentioned a few weeks ago, don't be when Yogi told me, don't be a demon yogi, right? You know, so because the demons are doing almost the same sadhanas we're doing. The only difference is the intention, right? So others, they worship the god, they worship the goddess. We can worship the goddess for other boons, right? We want maybe to overcome a sickness, right? To bless somebody who's passed away, right? To change our luck and love, right? Whatever, to find a spouse, to have a child, to have our child be healthy, right? These are all legitimate goals, legitimate things to want, right? And it's good to know where they come from, right? They come from the Divine Mother, and she is the giver of all blessings, right? And so we can pray to her for those things, right? So, but that's not the only siddhi. Siddhi could also be, some yogis do sadhana for spiritual power, for psychic powers or abilities, magical powers like this, right? And there's a classic list, right? You know, anima, lagima, you know, itcha, these different traditional lists becoming small and big and materializing, and these different lists. And that's a list of the ancient world. Most people most people I know aren't doing hundreds of hours of sadhana to become really small or really big. You know, yeah, I made it, you know, became really small or something, right? We have our own version of it, right? But this is a legitimate goal of yoga, right? Yogis do yoga also to become powerful, right? Whatever that means, whatever power is like. But that's the real spiritual affection. The final goal of life could be liberation. In Vedanta, we call that liberation, mukti. And in devotional traditions, we consider that pure devotion is siddhi. So what you want is what you pray for, right? And what we want, we pray for. If we satisfy the goddess, if we get her blessing, that's what she blesses, right? The siddhi that the gods prayed for in our text was to destroy. They had a worldly goal to destroy a demon, right, and overcome a major obstacle, tyrant obstacle, right? But also that they have unflinching devotion, right? And then the Himalaya, because of his purity, he got an even higher siddhi. But even after this, he's going to, even with this blessing, I'll be born as your daughter, right? He still asks further questions, right? That you'll see the last few verses of this chapter, he's going to ask, what's the real highest goal as presented in the Upanishads? Right, you know, that's so we're always given. So Sri Ramakrishna had this great saying, right? Go farther, go further, go farther, right? Never. So we think we know what our goal is, right? The goal is we should never be satisfied. We should be satisfied when we get the blessings of the Divine Mother, whatever those blessings are. But we shouldn't be satisfied. And the story Sri Ramakrishna told is there's a woodcutter, a poor man going to the forest every day. I've seen like this, you walk into the forest, you gather some twigs and branches, you come back and you sell it, right? It's a poor man's work, right? Poor person's work. And so he met one day a holy man, a brahmachari, saw him and said, go farther, right? And so he goes farther, he goes collecting, he goes, maybe there's something more. That holy man told me to go further in or farther. So he goes farther into the forest and he sees a forest of sandalwood trees. Sandalwood's very costly. So immediately by collecting sandalwood, he goes from a poor man to a rich man, a poor family to a rich family, and very satisfied with that. But then he said he shouldn't be satisfied with that. Well, it's wonderful. You shouldn't you shouldn't be ungrateful, right? The difference between dissatisfied and ungrateful, maybe that's a big distinction. He was not ungrateful, but that holy man said, he didn't say, go farther into the forest until you find sandalwood trees. He simply said, go farther, right? So he went a little farther, and then he discovered, as a story, I mean, there's a couple different story, but then he discovers a silver mine, right? And then he becomes inconceivably rich. And then later, after some time, he goes farther and discovers a gold mine. And then finally he goes farther and he discovers a diamond mine, right? The most valuable thing, right? And some version of the story will even, he says he even goes farther to discover that which is beyond all value, right? You know, but the point is that we should put into it, we shouldn't put a limit to what we're after, right? We are worshiping the great mystery, right? Who we know, what we know of her is mind-blowing and pulls us to go farther, right? But we don't know all of her, and we can never know all of her, right? And we keep going. I have a saying that I use for my own giving myself my own pep talk to myself, you know, one of those type of things you think about all the time. And that is that 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 every step reveals the path, right? And every step also reveals the goal, right? If you're on a spiritual path, whatever that path is, if you, let's say you've been on this, I mean, I've hit certain anniversary moments, right, recently, that makes you think, I've been on this path for so long, so many years, or, you know, Kali Mandir is now here 30 years. And, you know, we think of how long I've been, when did I first meet my guru? When did I become a monk? When did I first read about Sri Ramakrishna? When did I, you know, start thinking a little bit emotionally during transitional times? You start thinking of these things, right? And you see that the path we knew, the path we were on 20 years last year or 30 years ago, right? Even if it's the same path, won't look the same, right? If it looks the same, that means you may have been safely on a path, but you haven't gone anywhere. If it looks the same, right? A path means it should look very different every day. It should look different. You're at a different point, and the closer you get, the more the goal is revealed, right? Our understanding at the beginning of the path and at the end of the path will be very different. So we should be very open to the fact that we asked for one thing, but mom may want to give us something else, right? And then maybe the best thing, I remember one devotee used to tell me what he prays to Ma, right? He says, of course we could say, oh, whatever is good for me, you give me, right? That's something. Is still asking for what's good for you. That's maybe not the most, right? But he simply asked, Mother, bless me to love you more, right? Love me to love you more. That's what he used to say, right? So that's the further and further and further, no end to it. But this is one way I think of Siddhidatri. She gives us whatever we want, right? She gives us whatever we want if we've earned whatever we want, right? The thing about siddhis, sadhana creates siddhis. And so there's nothing that can get us the highest goal. No, but sadhana can purify the mind and heart, right? And increase our, in a purified mind and heart, devotion awakens. In pure devotion, the goal is seen and realized. So that's one way how I think of Siddhidatri. And what was the other question? You had another second part too?
Oh, one small thing. I remember in the Chandi it says that, like, oh goddess, oh Devi, bless us with that which is supremely uplifting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a beautiful thing. But the other question is actually about the Chandi.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, what do you think, from your own experience of reading the Chandi for however many years, is like the biggest takeaway for us devotees and sadhakas?
Yeah, the Chandi has so much in it, right? And the opening scene in the Chandi with Surata and Samadhi describing their two tales of woe, different tales of woe, right? And bewildered by not only the fact that they're suffering, but then they're also attached to the very things that cause them to suffer. That's what led them to that. So it's not only the crisis that they find themselves, losing their kingdom, losing their family, losing their business. Samadhi and Surata have their own slightly different story. So it's not just the problem of the suffering caused by their situation, but they were self-reflective about why they're attached, what brings them to be attached to the very things that cause their suffering, right? And so then they go to the sages, the sage Medas. Meda means spiritual intelligence. Medas is a very refined form of intelligence. So of course sages should have Medas, right? But we also have, once again, this idea of interpreting it a little bit. I tend to interpret it also as all happening within the sadhak's stages of the sadhak's life, we can ask ourselves, what is that causes us the core problem, the core ignorance, the core separation, the core suffering, right? And so they asked Medas, and he gives the answer. It's Maya, Maha-Maya, right? And then he describes it. And the question is, what is the stories are answering the three main mythic stories, the charitas, told in the Chandi, the three main battle scenes where the goddess saves the day again and again, are meant to illustrate the question is what is meant by Mahamaya, right? So we have to think so. And so it starts out, actually, this is that the thing that causes us to forget God and enter the world of illusion and repeated birth and death, right, is Maya. And how to get out of Maya? Our forgetting her has caused us to be in this world, right, of separation, right? And remembering her is the way out. That's that Vijamaya and Avijamaya, right? So I think the stories are sanguine, right? They're bloody stories, right? They're martial stories, right? Because at certain levels, there's battles going on within our hearts also, right? Right. We can maybe battle's not always the best metaphor to think of the spiritual struggle, but sometimes battle is not bad, right? And the ancient world's full of such battle scenes, divine battle scenes between gods and demons, right? That theme. But even the stories of the battle between gods and demons, that's an ancient mythic theme. But in the Chandi we mentioned last week, I think also, or 2 weeks ago, that the Chandi already elevates devotion and remembrance of the goddess, recognition of the goddess over almost the tropey nature of the battle scene that you're expected in such a text between gods and demons, right? Right. So it's devotion and remembrance. So each story is how we forget and how we can remember. That's what I take from it, right? And Medas means remembrance, right? Spiritual remembrance, right? And if we Sri Ramakrishna, when he did his beautiful prayers that we sometimes meditate upon, the prayers, Sri Ramakrishna's prayers of Divine Mother, the recorder of the Katamrita, the gospel, at the end of his life, he would summarize in his own way, talk with that long, Mother, the Sri Ramakrishna's praying to Divine Mother, and like, oh, do not delude me by thy world bewitching Maya. Right, I only want you. I have no devotion. I have no austerity. Only give me devotion for your lotus feet. He'd pray beautifully, like he teaches how to pray. Right, Jesus taught his followers how to pray. Sri Ramakrishna taught his followers the other Lord's prayer. Right, the God and the Mother's prayer. But M would summarize it. It was, do not delude me by thy world bewitching Maya. He'd say, Thakur taught us to pray, Mother, don't let me forget you. Right? Let me remember you, don't let me forget you. So beyond the complicated mythic tales of the Chandi, and which are so important, right? They're central to the Shakta tradition, Hindu Shakta tradition, right? The core of it is that by forgetting her, there's one Christian saint who says, I remember him, I fall, I forget him, I fall, I remember him, I rise. That's that same conception, right? And there's a Vaishnava in Jiva Goswami or Rupa Goswami, I'm forgetting, but there's a beautiful line. I quote this a lot. I should remember who and where I remember it from. It's from the I do remember the text. It's from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, I think. He says the primary rule of sadhana, right? All yamas, niyamas, all rules and regulations, observances and restrictions can be summarized into two. Always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. Right? Always remember God. We could say that. Always remember God, never forget God. Always remember the goddess, taking this universally for ourselves. Oh, never forget her. Always remember her, never forget her. And then he says, all the other rules and regulations, of which there are many, right? The details of our spiritual life and our religious life, right, are meant to be servants of these primary rules. They're meant to help us. including the stories like that. So that's what I pull from I mean, there's so many things that there's only the goddess. She is what everyone wants. Even the demons want her, only her, right? Everything, our separation from her causes our suffering. Each of the demon represents a different aspect of psychological can represent an aspect of a psychological separation from her, right? And at the final conclusion of the whole of the third story, where Shumba Nishumba, which names also mean like ego and too much and too little, and ego and lack and emptiness, and profound psychological scar of the ego, right? His final realization, she says, I am the only one here. There's nobody else but me, right? Look. And he sees it with his own mind, his own heart, that it's only her. That realization puts to death to such an ego, the whatever Shumba Nishumba represent are destroyed with remembering and realizing who she actually is. So there's so much in the Chandi and in the Mahatmya, but I take primarily Maya, the way those who remember her, she liberates. Those who forget her, itself is, we get lost into the world. And as she says, she takes even the minds of one of the great lines in the beginning, scary line. I think about it often. Monks are supposed to think about this line a lot, right? She takes even the minds of great ascetics and sages and puts them into illusion, right? All the way. So Sri Ramakrishna said, she cannot be fought. The idea of fighting Maya is a dangerous thing because she's also God, right? So she must be. Sri Ramakrishna said she must be perpetuated, and the Chandi is an example. That's the opening lines and the final. They ask, "What's the problem, Maya? How do we overcome it? Worship her, remember her, love her." And at the end of the story, they worship her, remember her, and love her, and they attain their cities. One becomes a king. One attains samadhi, right? They both attain the siddhidatri. They both attain what they want, right? The two goals of spiritual life: material happiness in this world and in heaven, or union with her essential being, and which is the question that Himalaya is going to ask at the end next Wednesday. We'll read that verse. It says, "How do we attain union with your essential being?" So this is the next question.
Thank you, Guruji.
Guruji, Krishna Chaitra had a question.
Krishna Chaitra, we've been missing you.
Daima Guruji.
Daima,
Good to see you.
oh, wonderful.
Thank you for a beautiful class.
Daima.
Been getting out of work late, so sorry for my absenteeism.
Yeah.
But listening after, thank you for posting. Yes, just have a quick comment, question, and then a more solid question. But the first one is just recently in regards to the aspect of the interpreting and exegesis of the symbolism behind the Devi Mahatmya or the Chandi and what have you versus literal meaning. Recently saw a lecture by Professor Edwin Bryant, on the New York Vedanta Society from Swami Bhajananda's YouTube channel, and it was last month, and I was saying, nowhere in the Bhagavad Purana does it say that this is all metaphorical or what have you. So he's making a point like that, and so I was thinking about that in terms of the Devi Mahatmya and the Chandi, and it's like, well, as far as I've seen or heard, I haven't, seen that it says anywhere where it's metaphorical. But I was thinking it has to be both. There's got to be meaning and symbolic meaning, deeper esoteric meaning that's revealed by Guru, Sri Guru, and Ma. And at the same time, there might be, since it doesn't say it's, it didn't really occur. And I was like, I'm kind of trying to harmonize that within myself, seeing it, the structure of a story or a chandi within the human mind that likes timelines, and then extracting meaning that make it personal, as you were saying, because that's the only way, and really the only way to really convey it to, say, somebody that's new to this topic. If you were to tell them that this is what literally happened, it's kind of a little difficult for others, So I was wondering to get your opinion on that.
Yeah.
Or your view, I should say.
Yeah. So I believe in that taking the text as the text is one thing is taking the text as the text is revealed, or what the text say about itself. But that's a good practice to read a text, what the text says, right? What the text is saying it says, right? Right. That makes it a piece of literature. When you read a text, is how to interpret a piece of literature is see what the text says. If you're looking for historical value of a text, right? Does it conform to historical reality? Is it describing historical reality? Right? That's more problematic, right? So ancient text, ancient people with ancient text and by here text does not just mean a written text. Text could be a mythic understanding, stories that come down in a community, right? Most people in the community take it to be the real description of the universe, right? And of their deities and of their people, right? And so we have to see it from within we also have to see it from within a tradition, right? And so to read a text, what the text says is one thing, right? And giving by the hints of what the text is saying, and reading from the way a tradition sits with it, understands the text. Like if you read or hear or learn of a story of a community that holds that there's a mountain in their proximity of a particular tribe from which the world, all people of the world come from, right? You know, it's like now we can say, well, that's, I mean, it's like historically or scientifically, maybe that's not where all people come from, right? But that might, but I probably wouldn't read that text for that to find out the exact migrations of communities and biological lineages and like that. But those are the. But I want to know how a community understands its sacred identity, right? Then that text would reveal that, right? And so we should. I think we should read. We should also read text, right? Or religious text, right, from within the tradition. Right, we try our best. Otherwise, it becomes just. I mean, we can also read. I mean, when something's published, right, and it's no longer secret and it's online, right? It's now an artifact for anybody to look at, something to look at and read and be interested. Oh, look what the Hindus believe, and look what this people believe, or what you can read these things, and you can't control it, right? But I think that's not our endeavor. We're trying to. We can do that, and we have the right to do that, right? Once the text is published, right? You can't stop it from happening. That's what I mean by right. Not that we're off that we shouldn't be. We're not that we should do it necessarily, but we can do it, right? But I'm approaching this text because I believe it has it reveals sacred reality. It reveals an ancient people, devotee of the Divine Mother, right? Okay, let me because this is part of my notes which I didn't get to, but now I already put them aside. I didn't want to talk about these things, but not I have to do it in a disorganized way. Just to focus on your question. How should I say? How should I say it? Trying to. It's a very. I think we'll have to give this may be. I have enough notes on this to have a whole discussion on respectful exegesis of scripture texts, right? Because this is what Will is boiled down to. But we can say this. I don't know if this conversation happened, right? You know that I have no way to know it, right? This conversation actually happened on top of the Himalayas when Parvati. I don't know like that. I don't know if Vyasa is the original speaker of this, right? Or original, like that. Whoever wrote it, right? Traditionally understood as Vyasa speaking it. Whoever has spoken this, whoever the community, whoever wrote it, right? I'm sitting at their feet when I'm reading it, right? That's I think my approach, right? Whatever the text is, we respect whoever the authors were enough to hear what they have to say, right? And not assume that we know more than them, right? And this is the problem when sometimes we approach texts not consciously disrespectfully, but we should be we should be sitting at the feet of whoever wrote the text, symbolically as Vyasa, or it could have been, a 15th century group of pundits in South India who, however it came down, a community, however these texts have been compiled and the stories brought down and put into Sanskrit in this particular form, right? We respect them enough to find value, personal spiritual value, listening to what they have to say. So we respectfully, we don't think we know more than them, right? Although we know more things, we know other things as well, right? But about this topic, we're going to them to hear it. Just like, in a much less dramatic way, you're listening to me speak because you think I may know something about this text, right? So I'm listening to the text because I believe whoever wrote the text, whoever the wrote it, has revealed spiritual knowledge, right? And so we take on the position of a disciple of Vyasa, right? And actually, this is an important part of Vyasa, but Vyasa being the author or the speaker of course, Sutta and Vyasa and of course all kinds of speakers, but the speaker of the scriptures, right? The guru also becomes, we call the seat of the guru Vyasa-san. The guru represents Vyasa, right? Somebody who we keep them at least a little bit above us. That's why the seat always has at least a few legs, right? It's not that somebody's higher. It's just knowledge flows down, right? So we listen to, we bring our own doubt. We can also bring our doubt and curiosity and education in question, right? But we take a humble position. I think that's the main concern, right? As far as how to take it like myth literally, traditions, community understood it to be how it happened. If we approach it, if we want to know what a community, a spiritual devotional thinks, we can see from within. I have a hard time. Maybe this is the pollution of the modern world. I can't help it. I have a hard time like ignoring other forms of knowledge, right, about history and other ways of reading text also, right? So I try to be respectful, right? I do see the symbolism and symbolic meaning, and there is a long history. I'm not making this stuff up, right? There's a history of other sages at whose feet we sit under, right? We learn from them the method of interpreting such texts, right? So we also, even our interpretive line is also from a tradition, right? Although we bring our own education and insight and foolishness to bear to these texts as well, our mistakes also to bear to these texts, right? But anyways, along those lines, this is too big of a topic. But I was going to say that I have to be careful that we don't want to say it didn't happen and like that. But if we put all of our strength on it, the literal interpretation, right? When we're not just dealing with a community that accepts the spiritual principles of the text, right? I think we may do a lot of disservice to the tradition also, right? There's museums. There's a Noah Ark museum that has dinosaurs, right? Because that's the view, right? So that's fine. That's a particular worldview, and it's a fascinating worldview that holds that dinosaurs and people lived before the ark, before the flood, like that, right? But I don't want to do that. I can't do that to the text that I love so much and the stories that I love so much. So I don't know, that doesn't answer any question, but it brings up a lot of. I have a lot of fascinating ideas which I do want to discuss. There's a course, second-year course in the seminary on classical and modern hermeneutics for spiritual text. So interpretation of spiritual text. So these are all good things to begin to stimulate in the mind how to approach these things.
Thank you. That definitely answered a lot of questions, and I really appreciate that. Yeah, definitely be signing up for that. No, that was a huge help. Yeah, thank you. Second, my second question was recently during this past week or last week, I had opportunity to have darshan of a beautiful Subhadra deity, South Indian and more than 100 years old. And it got me thinking of seeing another Subhadra deity that I remember seeing had fangs and blood on her teeth, from Subhadra, Jagannath, and Baladev. And from one of our common sadhu friends, he taught me he shared the Mula mantra for her, and it's the Pranava mantra and the Bija mantra for the Devi, and see Bhuvaneshwaryaye, and then the salutation. And so I was really surprised that it was Bhuvaneshwaryaye was in there, and so especially in this class, and so I was just wondering if you're familiar with traditional South Indian devotees that are out there, Shaktas or Maha devotees that also worship Subhadra Devi, Subhadra Ma, and in the mood of Bhuvaneshwari, and if that's like a bona fide or has precedent.
Yeah, it has it does have precedent, right? It does have precedent. Subhadra is a name, is the goddess Subhadra. Who she is not, I can't say it's not clear. Different saints and sages have claimed different personalities for Subhadra. For even Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra, even that combination, we know her primarily as Jagannath as Krishna, Balaram, Baladev, and Subhadra as Subhadra, meaning Krishna's sister, right? And so the question is, who Krishna? Think of him like that. Who Krishna's sister is? Who's her ontological position, right? So there may be traditions where a certain goddess took on that rupa, and that incarnation is Krishna's sister. So there can be a connection. There are some connections there. There's also people who've seen, like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw Radha Krishna and Balaram in a vision, not Subhadra Krishna and Balaram, right? Ramanujacharya, Madhavacharya, I think saw Sita, Ram, and Lakshman. Holy Mother saw Shiva. It's like so many. There's and there's also especially the worship of Jagannath in Puri at the famous Jagannath temple where Subhadra is worshipped. There is a Shakti Pitam in the temple itself, in the compound. I forget which Shakti Pitam is, one of the 50 Shakti Pitams, right? And there's a tradition where Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra all have Shakta Dashmaha Vidya forms, right? And I don't exactly remember. I mean, I have a few mantras and a few collected in some files, whenever for my own collection of data about these things, but I don't remember exactly. But Subhadra may be associated with Bhuvaneshwari in that story also. I don't know. But there is a tradition that even Jagannath is also seen as a form of Devi, right? As there's a tradition of that, and there are times of the year where Jagannath itself is worshipped with the symbols of different deities, including Devis. So actually I probably can click around, even not probably on somebody's old, if I click on the right things, I may be able to find an old Facebook post that somebody did on Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra and their connection to the Dashma Vidyas, which is interesting. So there is some connection. I mean, bona fide, of course, is a loaded word, right? It's like whether or not there's a community that understands her that way. Yes, right. That you can say. It's like there's other communities that'll be offended by that, right? But they don't understand her that way. What to do? That's how I look at it. It's like everything's bona fide by the community that thinks that way. So I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that label of bona fide or unbona fide, right? If there's the question is if there, like you said, you worded very nicely, is it a precedent for it? There is precedent for it. There are people who've done it's probably sometimes there's just like weird art that has stuff like that just like, where does this come from? And then you investigate, oh my God, there's all this really far out tantric art that makes Krishna into this, like that. And you investigate it, that this art has no scriptural foundation, there's no community foundation. And it's just because this is selling right now and modern artists are making it. That could be, so sometimes that's like maybe not bona fide, has no pedigree. But most of the things we find like that, especially with mantras like that, there's bona fide enough to somebody to write this mantra. It comes from somewhere, right? Where it comes from, we may never know. I mean, maybe this we could know, but I don't know. Yeah. interesting for sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Ooh.
Guruji. Okay, Ma.
Shamala Devi Ma has a question.
Amala.
Shema, Swamiji, I last year took personal vows that connected with Brahmacharini, and that was before the way that I understood her at the time was through her tapasya. So throughout the seminary, I've learned more, and it, like you said, tonight she did the tapasya to receive Shiva as her husband. And I wondered, because my own personal persuasion is to live more like a brahmacharini, can I look at, is it, I guess, acceptable to see it as not just as this physical union, but also as union with the divine?
Well, that's ultimately, I mean, once again, this is we're bringing a little bit of an esoteric, devotional, mystical interpretation to a story, right? So it's like even the marriage of Shiva and Parvati, and the tapasya, that the austerities that Parvati performed as brahmacharini, Shailiputri in a young age to get Shiva, right, is a symbol of, a metaphor of, whatever else it may be, and I'm not saying it's not other things, but it's also a very powerful symbol and metaphor of the spiritual search, right? And so Brahmacharini, especially, one of the graces that it's mentioned in Dhyan mantras even to her, right, is that she graces people with sadhana shakti, tapasya shakti, right, the ability to study and to hold vows and to form us to do difficult austerities to accomplish our spiritual goal. Right, our highest spiritual goal is our spiritual goal, our spiritual union, however that's understood, right? Because one of the things to argue for a not exclusive but an also metaphorical, slightly esoteric interpretation of these stories. And this is what happened a lot with some of the like Greek and some of the ancient stories in the West, Greek and Roman myth like that, where you have some of the gods and goddesses and some of the characters not behaving nicely. Of course, we're giving beautiful examples in this story of perfect behavior. It's a great metaphor for perfect behavior, brahmacharini behavior towards Shiva, right? But there are some stories of Shiva like that, where from our perspective, they're not behaving properly. Not that we would think how they behave. Zeus does some strange things, right? Although Zeus is it's not just a mythic god, he's a real god that people worshipped, right? Temples are built to him, right? And all of a sudden the stories of their gods, they look kind of strange, right? And so some of the ancient sages said, oh no, because these are there, you have to know how to read these stories. They're telling us the story is one thing, it may satisfy certain requirements of ancient story and the backstories. It may say something about our history, right? But it also says profoundly philosophical things, right? If we know how to interpret them, right? So some sages in Hinduism also have approached all these and we tend towards this tradition, right? To look at some of these stories, amongst all the things that they can do and do for the community, also can be read as metaphors for the spiritual search if we know the key, right? So Shiva and Shakti being separated and wanting union, this is the union between the soul and God, right? And that even Hatha yogis even make where Shiva lives up here and Shakti is at the base of the spine, right? And so brahmacharini, including brahmacharya, right, is one of the disciplines for the awakening, and so that the union of Shiva and Shakti at the top of the head, the real union, right, has to, the spiritual path becomes a path. The different goddesses are associated with different chakras, different stages of sadhana. So it can be read this way. It's not the only way to read it, but I'm arguing that this is a way that they have been read, right, and by sages and yogis, right, and they lend themselves to be read this way. And it may be a way that to make these stories very living for us today, right? And to get a new appreciation for how they would have been understood, or how, let's be careful because not to make them too exotic in the past, how they are understood by a devotional community. There's a great Vaishnava sadhu, His Holiness Varshana Swami, who in his many years ago used to come to Laguna Beach a lot, and he was a little controversial because he would interpret the story of Krishna's killing various demons, right, metaphorically, right? And Srila Prabhupada, his own guru, rarely did that, right? And I asked him why he's doing that, and why, says, well, he says, I'm not making this up, right? And this is from the writings of Bhaktivedanta Thakur, which is his Prabhupada's guru's father, right? So there is within the own tradition. He says Srila Prabhupada most likely, right? He didn't emphasize that because otherwise people dismissed it as mere myth, as if Krishna never was born, right? It's just a story of Krishna, not Krishna being born, right? So therefore he emphasizes this other aspect. But the metaphorical interpretation was given in scriptures. It's given by saints and sages and gurus within their own lineage, right? It has to be done properly. And I remember that what he told me, I've stuck with me tremendously over probably 5 years ago. He told me this. I still remember. He's very meeting with him is compelling. He's one of those spiritually people I've met in my life, so that's a big deal. Every word he's told to me has been a big deal. One of these he says that like different aspects of Krishna, stories of Krishna, like different demons and the different demons present different anarthas, bad qualities in the heart, right? Like since there's a demon that pretends to look like Balaram, and his name just not he pretends to look like Krishna's brother, and they wrestle, and whoever wins has to carry okay. I'm getting news that connection is getting bad. Oh, I'm sorry about this. Is it too bad? Oh, somebody said it's okay. Well, at one point then, because but so the demon that like he on is he pretends to be Balaram, and he puts Krishna. He wins a game, puts Krishna on his shoulder, and runs. No, he pretends to be another friend. He wins Balaram on his shoulder and runs off into takes him away from that. Right? Balaram realizes that and just pats the hand and kills him dead and joins Krishna's friends. Right? So that asura is said to be false guru. False guru looks just like a guru. It's like somebody authentic. Takes you away from God. Or all of a sudden you're away from the devotees, you're away from God and God's playmates. You're away like that. Right? So it's like that each one of the demons that Krishna kills represents a different anartha. He says it does represent, but if you take it just as a symbolic story that teaches a moral about be careful not to get a false guru, it doesn't get its power to destroy the anartha. Take Krishna as real. Krishna tu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is actually God, Bhagavatam said. If you take it as real and meditate on that story as if it happens and is happening, right? You remove that anartha. So the things that they're symbolic of happen if you take it to be real, not story. So his point is that you have to take these things, you have to take them as profound realities. If you take a profound reality, their symbolic quality gets shady. It's not just a story, it's a moral tale, right? It actually does the thing it's supposed to do. It overcomes meditating on that story frees us from the anartha of a false guru or whatever the anartha is. So he gave an argument that it is in the text, Prabhupada de-emphasized it because the West will take it as myth in the story, in the sense of not true, right? But even the proper nowadays, actually, no academic the word myth in that popular way of not true. Myth means it's a different, it's true in a different way. It may or may not be historical. It may be historical, right? But it has profound meaning when engaged as a sacred, right? And so even so this is the way I take these stories as profound sacred revelation, right? That all reveal profound metaphors about our spiritual life, right? And so there are sages that have given us interpretive tools that we're trying to use in our own interpretation, right? But because of the nature of my personality and the modern world and our group of students, also bringing in some academic scholarly understanding to kind of ground the whole thing, right? But that's primary, that's not my primary motivation for the text, for studying. But
So do you have any resources that you can point to maybe later for more on brahmacharya?
yeah. Did you ever get did a small little writing on the Navadurgas that people use for Navaratri? There's just a paragraphs on here. I'll send you that. Right, I can send you privately that. I mean, many devotees have that. A lot of them have been doing this as a way you can do each of the Navadurgas during the 9 nights. So there's
I have that. I have that.
you can see that, and if you just look, there's, I mean, I can direct you to websites, but there's, if you look up Brahmacharya, there's lots of interpretation. As far as like a scholarly interpretation of her, I'm not immediately familiar. I can't think of it right now, but I can sniff around and look around. But
I'll just search. I just
but
thought
I
you
see
might
her.
have
But the thing is that Parvati, she loved Shiva, but Shiva loves tapasya. There's the thing. So how do you get Shiva's attention? By spiritual practice, right? And so this is something, if Shiva, I mean, there's 9 forms that we could and want union with, right? If it's Shiva, how do you please Shiva? Shiva loves tapasya, right? And so it presents even Parvati in order to get needed tapasya, right? So this is, it's like if you change that on Krishna wants love, right? So then that, of course, it's the same thing, longing and love. But what do you, like that? What is, each form has flavor. The brahmacharya has to do tapasya, austerity, right?
Jama, thank you.
Jai Ma, Jai Ma. Well, I think it's 9:30, so it's late. We went too late, and we always do. But anyway, this is a good way to spend. Navaratri means the night of the goddess, so we can spend the night thinking of her. We encourage you to spend the rest of your night thinking of her. Tonight and tomorrow, if you're doing it for tomorrow. All right, Jai Ma, Jai Ma, Jai Ma, Jai Ma. Good night, everyone. God bless you.
Jai Ma.
Jai Ma, Durga Dasi. Jai Ma Kai. He's sleeping. He's a smart boy.
Oh, bear.
Very well. Jai Ma, Jai Ma, Jai Ma. All right. Jai Ma, Jim, Jai Ma, nice to see you. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om. All right. Jai Ma, Alex, good night, Elijah.
Good night, Guruji.